I'm going to assume we're live. This thing's always kind of off. So, welcome to another episode of Environmental Social Justice. We have this delay that happens with StreamYard. It's all the time. But today's show is just us. It is just the three of us. We chose not to have a guest today because we have had a lot of feedback talking about generational wealth and social justice. So, we're going to lead in with what Joel had commented about a couple months ago, that in school, growing up, he was taught how to write a check and not how to save money. And Joy's family came to Los Angeles from New Jersey and basically started buying real estate and establishing their own wealth. So, Joy, I'm going to start with you. Talk about your family. How you guys got where you are?
Yeah, so we're not very special people. We're just hardworking people. My uncle, rest his soul, everybody knows that he passed away in March. He came out here with a dream with his partner, and they had no education even. But they brought my uncle's sisters, which was my mom, and four other girls out one by one as they graduated. My mom was kind of considered gifted. So she graduated from high school in the rough part of New Jersey at age 15. And for a Black girl at the time, your options were limited.
And
Her
what
school,
year was this, real quick, just so we can get a
this
time?
was, geez, in the 60s,
Okay.
in this like the early 60s, because my mom went to school out here. 10 years later, she had me. But this was a time when, there weren't that many opportunities for African Americans. Definitely weren't any opportunities for gay Black Americans. So, they came out here, worked hard on regular jobs, put my mom through school, then my other aunts through school at UCLA and Cal State LA. And then when my mom got out, they figured that this was the best way to build wealth. And at certain points, they were living off of one salary so that they could invest in properties and their future. So, a lot of people these days don't really understand what sacrifice is to create something sustainable. But over the long term, it works, and it can work very, very well with family. I know some people don't like to work with family, but it's also like marriage. You just need to choose wisely somebody that you can build with, not just they look good, but they they
It helps.
can work together on something.
I mean, you got to take away some of the pain of the sacrifice here. So that's right.
Yeah, nobody who's just crawled out from under the dirt for sure. But
Well, maybe hose them off first, but yeah.
yeah, but you have to look beyond that when you're getting in any sort of relationship, or your family is your family. You have to, there's
Partnerships.
sacrifices that need to be made, and
If
it
I
worked
could
out really well for them.
if I can just jump in, I love the word you said, sacrifice, because growing up, I mean, I live in fear of debt. I don't carry debt because it terrifies me. But my parents growing up, my dad was a resident. Residents do not make much money. So they never went out. They never went to a movie for like 3 or 4 years. They didn't even go to a movie or out to dinner or anything. A big day out was McDonald's for us. So my parents knew what the end game was. So when you said sacrifice, a lot of people like, well, I deserve the Louis Vuitton bag. Because I heard that in college a lot. They racked up their credit cards, like, well, I earned it. I worked hard. I'm like, I understand you worked hard, but this will hurt you in the long run. Interest rates are huge. This happens. And sometimes you kind of have to also think, do you need it? You know,
Right.
um, I think the best lesson in life I ever learned was how much is enough, going
Yeah.
from you just don't need certain things anymore. And a lot of people don't really realize that. So I love the fact you said sacrifice. So sorry to interrupt you.
No, it goes along with the fact that, we're into
Hmm.
sustainability on all levels. And I think it's no coincidence that, the three of us are good with money. We take, oh, Joel.
Hey, look, I freely admit I have my moments where I am not that great. I generally don't. I swing very far on a pendulum sometimes where I will go batshit cray. And then sometimes where I'm like, I do not want to buy a pair of socks because I need to save that $1.50 or $2 or whatever it is. Like I literally swing so far in my moods, and I think that's
Well,
dangerous
that's
as
a lot
well.
of people, right? And especially
It's
now
dangerous.
with everything going on, like, COVID,
Yeah.
and we all need something to jumpstart us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things that I know that we all share in common is, the idea of sustainability. If we, conserve water, if we conserve certain resources, they will prove to be abundant for us in the entire environment, later. So I kind of take those same savings, and how I was raised, as a child, into every aspect of my life. I live off of one check. I do believe in diversification. That's what they used to call it in the days, early 2000s, diversification. Putting a little money here, doing something, different there. I try to live off of, one income source at any given time. I really try to be conscious, and people are like, you're single, you're this. Well, I have goals of, where I want to, leave, my legacy. And I work hard, toward that. That gives me something to save for and to sustain for, and, a better planet and a better environment as well.
And that was a very subtle way to work in that you're single. Very subtle. Just saying.
I'm not. Believe me, I'm not on here trying to catch anybody, but if
Although you are a catch.
surprises, hey, you two are always the ones that try to hook me up with someone. I don't get it, but
Yeah,
Why wouldn't I? You're a catch. You're beautiful. You're smart. You're accomplished. You're the trifecta. But Joel, I'm gonna just segue into Joel. So Joel and I went to university together, and there was this student union, and they always had credit card companies lined up and down. Sign up for a credit card, get your debt, or rather get your credit card and spend money. And I looked at them like Satan. I would look at them with such disdain and hatred because I knew that getting yourself in debt was bad. However, many students just walked down the line and just signed up every single card. You did that, all of them?
I don't know if it was all of them, but I definitely had a couple, and I maxed those suckers out in a heartbeat because you're not like like we've talked before, you're not taught the ramifications or explain. I shouldn't say taught. It's not explained to you the ramifications of or the responsibility that comes with having these. But that being said, we're also living in a world where we have such diversities right now, and I'm not making an excuse for things. We are literally entering this society where it is the haves versus the have-nots. That's it. The middle ground is almost obliterated. So when there are people who have to live on credit cards and you're just trying to eke by. And I think, from my personal experience, I kind of ran those up because I didn't understand the full ramifications of what I was doing. It's just kind of like you're told, oh, welcome to the credit card. You can get this, you can get this. Mind you, it's not explained to you. If you don't pay this, you have like an 18, 14, 29% interest rate that is getting accrued each and every month, and what that means in the long run. And so it wasn't explained to me to fully understand it. And mind you, I was like late teens, early 20s. Do you think I would have cared? I mean, so
Well,
is it a little predatory? Yeah, probably.
Totally, yeah.
The little slap in the face to add to that is in order to buy anything like a house, a car, etc., you need a credit report. How do you get a credit report? You get a credit card. So it's this horrible vicious cycle that when my sister moved back to the US from Switzerland, because she lived in Switzerland for like 20 years, they didn't have a US credit report. It just didn't exist.
No, it's only I think we're the only country that really focuses on a credit report like that.
Yeah, so they had a hard time, just like, we need to buy a house. And I mean, their credit would be excellent because they're accomplished, seasoned professionals, but they lived in Switzerland. There was no tracking. And she was like, this is interesting. She was literally like, this is interesting. So it's a vicious cycle. And I mean, today's going to be a short one because it is just us.
Well,
But
I think it's also even weirder is that it's like to build your credit, I believe you actually need to carry debt, and so that you can maintain the debt.
Carry debt, but also pay it off in a timely manner.
Right. But it's like, so if you have your credit, as it was explained to me, and again, I'm not a financial advisor, so please take
that one coming up in a couple weeks.
What I'm just saying is that, like, my understanding is that you don't you should normally try to pay off your debt as much as you can. But at the same point in time, if you've got credit card debt, if you pay it off every month, that can hurt you. If you remove your credit cards, that can hurt your credit report. So, I mean, if you actually try to be responsible, you can hurt your credit rating. It's the most convoluted, confusing system that
Oh,
I've
yeah,
ever
it
heard.
sucks. It's stupid. I mean, is it true that if you check your own credit score, that affects your credit score?
Not really.
Not really. Okay, I was wondering about that.
Yeah. There's different
Some
types of credit hits that can be run. There's a full credit and there's a soft credit. And so generally, like if you're checking your thing on like a not daily, I mean, obviously if you're doing hits all the time, I believe that will impact you. But if you're, and again, not a financial advisor, so take this all with a grain of salt. Always consult with a professional. Um, but you should be aware of what it is. But at the same point in time, there are different levels of credit hits that will happen. That can happen.
Gotcha. So yeah,
It's
vicious cycle. I mean, again, this is a short one today because it's just us, but just giving advice. For my advice to anyone out there is if you don't need it, you don't get it. I mean, if I would always look at things, do I really need this? No. Do I want it? Desperately, but I'm not going
I
to do
think
it.
that's the difference. There's no, I'm sorry, this doesn't have to be a short one, in my opinion.
Okay.
Um,
I
I
was
think
being respectful of your time because y'all are busy.
I appreciate that. But I think for me, it's not a matter of whether or not you need it or you want it. It's a matter of like, how do you define need versus want? And I think that's something that we're not really,
Right.
we don't focus on that. We focus on this very consumer culture. We
Yeah.
just are, whether it's being able to, I mean, you can now rent furniture to furnish your place. And then, it's like a subscription thing. You can keep changing it up and changing it up. And it's like, okay,
Very usurious process as well.
yeah. So it's like, whether it's the environmental impact that you're having or your financial impact. And again, I don't know what these things cost. I understand the purpose behind renting furniture and sometimes the necessity for these things,
Yeah.
and I think it's a matter of how people approach things, whether you're looking at it as a short-term stopgap in order to get me through to the next hurdle where I can move forward, or if this is the lifestyle that you're creating, which is just saying everything is disposable and replaceable, because those are the two different impacts. When so I'm just going to talk about Joy, and you guys were very fortunate to be able to do the investment properties. Very fortunate to have that opportunity. A lot of people think about it, and I've spoken to numerous people. Oh, I want an investment property, and I have to talk to them like, okay, do you want to be a landlord? Because it's not just about having
That's a whole nother show.
exactly.
Yeah.
Because I mean, people think like, oh, I can just invest in real estate, I can rent it out. It's like, okay, but do you know what this means to be a landlord?
And
Do you?
property taxes and,
Yeah,
Prop 13.
Utilities.
And,
yeah,
there'd be no way I'd be able to afford,
yeah,
properties myself these days as opposed to,
yeah.
what they were before.
But
Well, yeah, buying in the 60s and 70s is very different than buying now.
But
Yeah.
even if you can't afford it, do you have the time in your life to be a dedicated landlord? Do you understand the liabilities that come with this? Do you understand the maintenance that comes with this? Do you understand the expense? You're not going to sit there and just collect a check. I mean, you will, hopefully, because you also don't know who's going to be renting it out. People can look great on paper, they can look great, and then the second they get in the door, it's a Jekyll and Hyde situation. You have to be prepared for those items as they come to
Look,
you.
it takes a village. Like I'm not sit up here and act like this is something easy. So we don't even have a property management company.
Exactly.
So guess how this
Yeah.
certainly goes. My mom's money woman writes the checks. Anybody who needs to get paid, make sure all the bills are paid, property taxes, what have you. My dad's the journeyman, former engineer. He goes around, if something is broken, he checks to see what exactly is broken, and then we will hire out a contractor from there. So we have to have a whole list of contractors that we know and trust and that, like us, and that will put us priority on the list due to the fact that they know that we're going to pay on time and we have a trusted relationship. And then I'm the villain. I'm the one who, does the eviction process, the one who's, down at the courthouse, the one who is screening all tenants, making sure, going through their credit report, dealing with our attorney on questions that I don't, know. So, at some point, I probably will have to get a management company, but it takes a village in this situation to make it work. We're like true mom and pop, but
Well, it's also
to make it
and
happen.
it's also understanding the legalities of being a landlord, like when it comes to Section 8 and what you cannot do, how how to properly screen a tenant. I mean, there's a lot of things out there that are huge variables for people that if they're becoming a landlord, they don't know about going into it. And once a lot of people, I think, get into those situations and they're like, well, what did I just do?
Right,
Oh
right.
yeah.
And
We had, I
so,
mean,
yeah.
we have a tenant who our handyman won't come back.
To deal with her, exactly.
She launched in just screaming at him. She's a screamer, we hear her all the time yelling at her kids, or what she calls her kids, they're adults, but she'll scream at them. And we have a couple of our maintenance guys, handymen, that just said, I'm not coming back to her. I'm like, okay, thank you. We
Yeah.
had another tenant in the front unit. She had a couple small dogs that she never once took outside to relieve themselves.
Mm,
And about $15,000 worth of damage later, with hazmat teams,
yeah.
we got the smell out. So,
And you also have to look at the codes and the zoning for where you live. I mean, we just went through a pandemic where you were not allowed to evict anybody and you can't do this. And being a landlord is hard work. It is really freaking hard. So it's like whether you're looking at that or you're trying to figure out a monthly budget, it's a matter of a lot of it just comes down to an education and what you're willing to do because none of this is easy at all. And a lot of it is about really training yourself on how to think differently and how to really analyze what you've got. And going back to what you said earlier, it's like I know growing up I wasn't taught any of this. I remember going to school, it's like, okay, this is how you fill out a check. You put the dollar here, then you got to write out the amount here, then you sign it, and then you're good to go. Or this is how you balance your checkbook, but never like, okay, this is how you prepare for your future. This is what a 401k is. This is what an IRA is. This is
yeah.
what this is. That's the stuff that we're not taught. We're taught how to give it away but not how to keep it and actually build for our future. And I think that's well, I know that's a huge issue. It was for me.
Oh, it's a huge failing in the
Yeah,
education
they
system
tell
too.
us, that you go to college and, you get a degree, and then all of a sudden, magically, your life is,
Yeah.
you know,
But we're
it's
not
like
going to tell
a
you that it's going
Cinderella
to take
story.
20 years to pay off those loans, you know, right?
Right,
It's like, and that's the other thing. It's like not everybody needs to go to college. Why can't we
right.
tell people that there are really good jobs that are working in our labor force right now?
Well, that's what I
We
love
need,
about Mike Rowe. He's always talking about trade schools. He's like, you can be an electrician and
yeah,
make hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you can.
Well, that's the way it's going to go from now on. I mean, these huge endowments that these, universities have, those are going to be non-existent.
yeah.
B, with all of the work that needs to go on, due to COVID, inflation, jobs are going to be, probably in the transportation sector, and there are going to be like port jobs, what have you. If you can get anybody to go back to work after all of this stimulus and this, talk about, that's another issue. We'll see what the employment scene looks like in about a year.
My understanding
Fair
is
enough.
from what I saw on the news yesterday is that the employment rate has actually been underreported. So there's actually been more jobs created than has been reported. So I'm like, this is a really good sign. And I think it's a matter of actually, oh God, I'm gonna get a lot of crap for this one. People getting paid what they're worth.
I was just
It's
about to say they're undervaluing the salaries. So I
yeah,
posted yesterday on LinkedIn. Um, I help some recent graduates with their first jobs. Like I'll put somebody in touch with anybody on my LinkedIn account. I don't care. And these young kids, they're in the position of they need a job. And I remember being in that position. I needed any job, just hire me. But they won't list a salary. And then they say, well, what are you looking for? And they'll say, well, what's the range? What are you looking for? This cat and mouse game, because they're afraid to lowball themselves, but they don't want to sound greedy. Publish the damn salary.
yeah.
You have a range, throw it in there. Give somebody's, you don't want some kid lowballing themselves and they'll be stuck at that low level for a while until they pull out. And you don't want someone saying, okay, I'm just going to ask for the top number possible. And then have that HR person say, well, they're just greedy.
Yeah.
Just publish your range. Give people a break. Because there are a lot of scared kids out there that just want that first job.
Well, people don't know how to value themselves. I
No,
mean, that's the other. I mean, I used to when I used to teach,
especially on
and
the
so
social justice aspect.
yeah.
Disadvantaged communities, they do not know how to value themselves.
I mean, I used to teach years ago, and I remember, there was a student who was doing some freelance work, and I'm like, "Okay, great. What are you getting paid?" And they're like, "Oh," and I'm like, Did you just sign up to do long-term projects without setting a time limit on a limit on how much you're gonna do under the normal rate, and then going anything revisions or beyond that, you get paid additional for it? Like, "Oh, I didn't think about it," because they just wanted the work. And I appreciate that so very much. But at the same point in time, it's like you're now making maybe $5 an hour by the time it's done.
Yeah.
And you're using all your own equipment. You're using your own software. You're using your own power. You're using everything that you're now paying for. So really, if you're lucky, you made $5 an hour, but now we got to pay taxes on that, and then you got to also pay for your bills. So,
This is my story to share is my lesson learned recently. So for the past few years, I've helped a certain alma mater with quite a few of their panels on sustainability and moderating them and participating and finding the guests and organizing it and working with them. And they keep coming, we want to do another one. I say, of course, anytime. And then, UCLA comes to me and says, hey, we want to do a panel and we're going to pay you a $500 honorarium. And I'm like, you're going to pay me? Okay. Thank you. Didn't even have to ask. So first alma mater comes back, hey, we saw your webcast. We love what you're doing. We love this guest. We'd love to have you and recreate it. I'm like, awesome. I would have to, after 3 years of sweat equity, I'm going to have to ask for a $500 honorarium. Immediate response. We don't pay for our alumni. You should be giving back to the university. Now that we know you're charging, we'll find somebody else.
okay, bye.
I'm like, so I'm not awesome?
Yeah, no, you have to know your self-worth.
Yeah, and that was
like that, but you have to just know your self-worth and what you're able to accomplish. I mean, that's a whole other, having a sustainable career is probably a whole nother conversation. But
yeah, and I mean, that was this only happened a few weeks ago. And it was kind of like a shock to me so this place that I've been helping for 3 years and meeting with them and putting them in touch with people and organize, blah, 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 blah. It's not worth $500. It's not much. That's a really small amount to completely isolate and diminish a relationship.
Well, I mean, it's kind of like, there's all these different job postings out there where it's like, oh, if you work for us, we can't pay, but we can give you exposure. And it's like,
oh, to hell with exposure.
What is exposure?
Yeah, so it's like, oh, we're gonna give you portfolio pieces. You can promote this. You can talk about your experience doing this. And it's like, that's great, but this is obviously going to be a full-time job, and no.
Yeah. Or my favorite, if you do this, as part of your application process, please complete this project. Students have had that, and it's like, don't do it. That's free work. Don't give them your ideas.
It's such a weird time, but I mean, just going back to the subject at hand, which was talking about generational wealth and planning for it. I think the main thing for anybody to do is just figure out what you want and to try to set a plan as much as you can. I think that's kind of the key takeaway for everybody, but it's great. Set your goals, do what you can, work towards that, but understand that there's going to be stuff that happens that you cannot control. So you have to plan for, day to day, your future, as well as the inevitable. And honestly,
money.
Plan to try to do something. I think people should try to plan to do for something for themselves. I am a fan of retail therapy. I will admit that, because sometimes you just want a pair of shoes. It'll make you feel better.
You deserve it. Yeah.
Do you need it? Maybe maybe not as much as you probably could, but sometimes you kind of feel alive to be able to spend something frivolously.
That's what I loved about Loehmann's. I used to spend hours in the New York Loehmann's because you could get something relatively nice for real cheap. And you got that little retail therapy, but you're spending $60, not $500.
I know. I was just watching the news this morning. They were talking about, honestly, how much shopping is happening right now in the world, but yet, or in the country, and inflation rates are going up and people are spending money like never before. But then they're talking to families that are basically trying to just live, and it's really kind of, I think we mentioned this before. There was an article I saw a couple years ago that talked about the second coming of the Gilded Age. And it's like, I think we're starting to see this more and more, which is terrifying and heartbreaking to see, because it's like, the cost of housing is going up. Food, I think they said eggs went up almost 11 or 12% over last year. It's just the cost. Exactly. I mean, the cost of everything are going up. I know we've got supply.
Heating oil is going to go up.
We've got these huge supplies.
We had a hard time locating turkeys for the turkey drive we're having on Monday. So through the grocers and all of the associations that we usually use. Yeah, there's even a turkey shortage. So I think that New Year's is going to bring a lot of interesting challenges. But I think what we can all do to kind of gird up is to make plans, have our visions,
Yeah.
have our goals, and then have the simple steps that we can take, baby steps that we can take to accomplish those goals. We don't need to stress ourselves out. You know, this year, instead of Christmas gifts, my parents and I are giving each other $500 in account with for Bitcoin. So that's just money that we can, you know, screw around. We don't know anything about Bitcoin. We are learning. But that's going to be like our new family business. My dad already does the stock market.
Nice.
And he does pretty good, you know, even at his age, 82, and he's like on
I'm
it.
calling
He's
your dad.
market every day.
But you know,
He's like awesome.
I think
But
this actually, I'm sorry to
yeah,
interrupt.
we're just gonna try something new. Like try something new and at an amount that you know you can afford to give. Work with a partner or a husband or a spouse. Figure out what you can do to make more money in the new year by instead of in lieu of a present, give a couple $100 to something that you guys want to try.
Yeah,
But you know, I think for me, the biggest takeaway of that whole thing is realizing you're not alone. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing right there for a lot of people who are
Yeah.
struggling right now is that you feel so alone, like you have nobody to talk to about this. We need to figure out the support systems for people. I know that there's government agencies that are out there to people, whether it's fixing your credit or trying to get your credit card bills down, trying to help you get a budget. You know, try to find somebody that you can talk to. You can't just keep these things inside because you're never going to be able to go forward. It's going to eat you up, and there's no way around that. That's human nature. So I think that for me is actually one of the biggest things is realizing you have to have somebody to talk to, whether it's a friend, a partner, a loved one, or a paid counselor. You know, you need to get help. If you need to get help for it to plan for your future, ask for help. It's okay. It's
Yeah.
perfectly fine.
No one learns this through osmosis. We learn it from other people.
But we're
And
taught to be embarrassed about it. That's the
yeah,
problem.
you shouldn't be. I mean,
No.
I mean, again, I've always been terrified of debt, and I'm cheap as hell, as you know, because you've known me the longest.
Me
But
too.
one of the things, just to, you know,
How do I
saving
cheat
money, and
people?
people often have asked me for advice, and they said, well, I need to go out, and, you know, when I was living in New York, a friend of mine's like, I need to go at least 5 days a week. I'm like, well, you're not going to save much money if you're going out 5 days a week. That's expensive. Drinks are expensive, especially in New York. I circumvented that by having friends come over. And Joel, you saw me do that in college.
Yeah.
I would invite people over. I'd make pasta, which is super cheap, maybe some meatballs, and we'd all hang out. We got the social interaction,
Yeah.
whether it was watching a movie or hanging out, but it was a much cheaper evening.
And I think the thing is to realize is that every single person is going to be different. We can't, it's not our job to tell people how to live. We
No,
cannot do that. You know, but that's why I'm like, if you're feeling in a certain way, find somebody to talk to. I think that is like the biggest thing for me right now is that like, and it's like everything in life, unless you're seriously willing to make a change, ain't gonna happen. It just ain't gonna happen. I mean, and that's everything in life. So yeah, but again, I just have to say this: we are not financial advisors in
no, we're
any
not.
way, shape, or form. So this is our disclaimer right here, right now. Do not come to us for financial advice.
No.
All we can do is talk about our own personal experiences. So please do not take this as financial advice. Talk to a professional. Have to say it. Just have to say it.
Legal disclaimer by Joel. So
And
Joy,
while you're chomping on your turkey over the holidays, just be reflective and, you
Be
know,
grateful.
be grateful for what you do have, and then you can work on where you're trying to get. So
that's damn good advice. A lot of people look at what they don't have. I don't have the jet. I don't have this. I don't have that. Every day I'm like, you know what? I'm doing okay. Do I live on, you know, on a secluded island with my own private jet? No. Do I need it? No. It'd be awesome, but it's not going to happen in my lifetime. But you got to look at what you have, and you got to work towards what you have. I mean, Joy, I love your family's story. They lived on one income out of several people and worked and worked and sacrificed and bought, knowing that end game. That's my favorite story.
Yeah.
but no one person was smarter than the other. So they had to, you know, come together
Forever.
and we still work together to make that portion. Well, I try to work on other things too, you know, my job, my, you know, consulting when I'm not on my job. Just try to keep a couple of hustles till I figure out which one is going to be the eventual path. So
that's all we can do.
yeah.
I mean, everything we do, we just try to do for the betterment of society. At least in my opinion, I try to do things to help people. This entire show is just about helping people, educating, communicating, explaining. This is a little bit divergent from our normal, but we've had so many questions.
It
It's,
all
yeah,
comes together. I
it
mean,
does.
at the end of the day, if you have to figure out a way to ask for help for yourself before you can really help others. It's just kind of the way I think it goes.
Yeah, and that's good. That's sage advice. Ask for help. Reach out to your friends, family. If your friends and family aren't there for you, school teachers, people in your church, people in your community, people you work with that you're cool with. Sometimes work friends are not as friendly as you think. We've all had that. But we'll end it up on this. We're in our 30 minutes. This went longer than I thought, which was awesome. It was a good discussion. We are off next week for Thanksgiving, but we have some interstitial interviews coming up that I'll post later. And I believe we are back in December, beginning of December. We have people lined up through January. So we're busy and more to come. Lots more. And again, send us your recommendations. If there's a topic you want to hear about, if there's something you're like, hey, you guys haven't talked about blah, 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 let me know. I will hunt them down. I've gotten really good at hunting people down. So on that, guys, thank you so much. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful holiday.
Happy holiday.
Happy holidays. Stay safe, everyone. We'll see if this actually ends.